Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I am your host, Benedikt, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood. Hello, Malcolm. How are you?
Hello. I'm great, man. I just had a wonderful weekend on one of the Gulf Islands near me with some really cool, famous people. It was awesome.
Which famous people?
I think I'm allowed to say. I was with Robert Bateman and Bristol Foster. And so Robert Bateman is probably one of the most famous realist painters in the world, the living painters in the world, and he's like 90 now, and just an incredible dude. And his buddy Bristol Foster is a very famous naturalist, and pretty much what happened is they did this trip around the world in the 50s in a Land Rover. They like camperized a Land Rover and took it by boat from North America to across the Atlantic, and then they ended up in South Africa in this thing. So like a trip like you can't even imagine, right?
That is crazy.
And then in Africa they met Anne, she's like the Jane Goodall of giraffes. She's like the kind of like the original person to study, at least Western study giraffes in the wild, and then so they kind of made history doing this thing, and then they all went on to become famous people in their own fields, and they just had their like first reunion in 30 years, and we got to document the whole thing. It was an incredible weekend.
I was about to say now that like the question is what the hell did you do there?
Yeah.
But you kind of answered it. You documented it.
Totally. And I mean, like all of that happened in the 50s, so like it really hasn't been, that story hasn't really been told in like a present context in a way that people can really watch now. So that's kind of the goal, I think, with the producers. They want to have like a feature documentary telling that story of this amazing trip, because they saw, I mean, they saw tribes that don't even exist anymore, and species that have gone extinct since they did it, and it's just like it's a different time. It's very cool.
For sure.
So, great weekend. How about you, Benny?
Not so great, to be honest. I was just home sick. The kids are sick, and we all got kindergarten and school germs, and like we've been battling that. But yeah, it's been fun though as well, because we did long movie nights with the kids, and just relaxing. And
nice.
Nothing spectacular. So
change it up. That's good. I have one gear talk I want to bust in to this episode before we kick off our real topic. The new MacBook Pros. What do you think?
I was about to ask you if you already ordered one, because no, but I would lie if I said like I haven't thought about it. So.
Yeah, it definitely reached my checkout box, but I did not click the order button.
No, me too. I think I will wait for like real life reviews, and like I'll just see how it works for people. It seems though that this is the first generation of MacBook Pros in a long time that's just looks really cool. So I don't know. It's they just did, in my opinion, they did everything that people wanted from them, and they fixed the things people were complaining about, which is good news. So these new MacBooks seem to have everything I would want from a MacBook, and mine is probably the shittiest one of all. Like the 2018 one that I have, on paper is great. Like the specs are insane, but it has so many flaws that I don't know, that I would really love to have one of those new ones.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it just still works, and it's a powerful computer, and I don't want to buy a new one after 3 years. So we'll see.
I hear you. I've got the late 2016 one. It's very similar to yours. It's like, it's powerful, but flaw ridden, and the keyboard barely works because they screwed up that design. It's like, it's a very expensive piece of junk, honestly.
Yes, exactly. And the new ones are even less expensive than the one that I have, and like, it's I don't know. I'm totally blown away with how much power is now in a laptop. It's like for audio, we are now set for the rest of time. I think audio people are going to have no trouble getting a computer that is more than powerful enough to do what they want. It seems like these new MacBooks would be fine if you wanted to make a video game. It's like they're just so damn powerful. It's insane. Yes. I mean, it's kind of crazy what I can do with mine, with the i9 that I have, and like this is already so powerful, but it's loud and it gets hot, and it has all these flaws that these MacBooks have because they're just too thin and like have too much power and that, like, and all that stuff. But with the new M1 chips, this is not an issue anymore. So I would really love to have one of those eventually. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I think the best news about this, and this is relevant for our audience, I think the best news about this is, as you said, that there is enough computing power available in a laptop so that you don't have to worry about doing audio work anymore, about being able to do audio work anymore. But also, there is no excuse anymore to not be mobile in a way. So I think, I made the switch a little early maybe. I just didn't want to have a desktop computer anymore. I wanted to be able to work from wherever I wanted to, and I wanted to have my studio computer with me at all times. So I made the switch, and it worked, but not without problems with that computer that I have. But with these new models now, even with the base MacBooks or like the smaller MacBook Pros and stuff, these are so powerful and portable. So that just means that a musician can wherever they are, they can just make music and use virtual instruments without running out of computing power or RAM or whatever. And you just have a very, very powerful portable studio rig with you at all times with these machines. So totally. That is really, really cool, because so far it was possible to work on a laptop, but still limited. But with these machines, I don't think there are any limits now anymore.
Yeah, they're gone. They're more powerful than the desktop at the studios I rent all the time now. So
yeah, exactly.
The really, like you mentioned, you want to wait and get some real world reviews, and really I think what that comes down to for me is seeing how they do handle heat, and if that fan kicks into overdrive as soon as you have a real session going, which is honestly a problem for self-recording bands, because that fan can be so loud. I've just got some vocals recently, and like right at 180 hertz, there's just this terrible hum, and it's the computer fan, and it's like, well, that's a part of a vocal I would like to use.
Yes.
And I know I've got a friend who's like a viola recorder, and like the hum with the noise signal noise ratio of like a stringed instrument like that is pretty loud. Yeah. So it's like a total shame for them that they hate their computer because of that. So if they have actually greatly reduced or even eliminated fan noise, that's like something I'm very interested in. And of course, the computer not heating up and starting to not be able to process properly is important too.
Yeah, exactly. You actually hear that fan noise right now on my voice because I gate it out, and when we edit the podcast, it's being gated, and there's like a noise reduction plugin and whatever, but you can still hear it when I'm talking in the background. So, and it's more audible than on your track, Malcolm, because I'm using a condenser mic. But that is a real problem. Yeah, we both have it.
Like while recording this, it's almost distractingly loud in like just my room. It's like, God.
Yes, exactly.
So anyways, what an improvement.
Okay. Yeah, what an improvement. I hope that it's a great improvement, and it seems like it is. But we'll see. Okay, so let's get to today's episode.
Okay.
Talking about
one warning before we do.
Go ahead.
Listeners, I am on the west coast of Canada, and we are expecting a giant storm. So if I just go silent and this episode ends, that's what happened. We'll probably be fine though.
All right. We just watched Castaway yesterday, the Tom Hanks movie, with the family, and now all these pictures come to my mind, like Malcolm stranded on the island somewhere without anything.
No, I think it's going to be fine where I live, probably. But I don't have windows in my studio room, so I have no idea what's going on over there.
All right, cool. Let's hope for the best.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, talking about having a portable rig or like working remotely. This episode is about working remotely with other people, and those people are session musicians. So it's about how to find a professional session musician, best practices for working with session musicians. And it's something we haven't really talked about. And I think it's a cool topic to cover for two reasons. Because the first obvious reason, I think, is that if you're not able to play something yourself very well, you can just hire someone who can do it and upgrade the quality of your work that way. Mm-hmm. And the other reason is that I think as a self-recording band, you are like perfectly set up to be a session musician if you want to be that. Like, you are a musician, you can record yourself. And if you are good enough in both those things, you could, in theory, start a career or just offer your services to other people or do it as a side hustle or whatever. But you could definitely make money off of that, or just do something that fulfills you and where you can make good use of your equipment if your band is not recording. So I think it's worth looking at it from those two perspectives, because I think a big part of our audience could actually be session musicians. They might just not have thought about it.
Yeah, totally. Playing music on other people's tracks is more fun than playing music on your own tracks. It's awesome. It's like a great time. It feels so creative because you find yourself in a situation that is totally different than what you normally do because you didn't make the situation. So it's a great experience. But really, this episode isn't about convincing you to become one, although you should consider it. We want to teach you why you should consider hiring them. Hiring a session
it's hard to say, right? Like
hiring a session musician and like what the advantages of that are, and just like common obstacles into finding. Like I do it all the time. I probably have more experience in hiring session players than Benny does, just with like my genre and how I work, and I think I'm very good at it. I have a very high success ratio for what we get coming back being exactly what we wanted. So that's the most important part, because it feels weird trusting somebody that you've never met in a lot of cases to just send you what you hope for. It's like that could go badly. And it has gone badly for me once. Once we just got something that was terrible. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what we wanted. And they said they were going to give us a revision, but just never did. And we essentially just lost that money. And that was a personal project with my buddy Marcus, a co-host on the other podcast, actually. So we failed with my own thing, but with other people's music, done really well. So we want to make sure that goes well for you as well. And there's a bunch of stuff we can talk about on this. So
I'm going to ask a couple of questions here because you really do know more about that than I do. So let's start by saying, maybe give us a couple examples of situations where you would actually hire or consider hiring session musicians, because I assume that most of the time you are working, even though it's a little bit like a little different from the genres that I work in mostly, but you're still working with bands. So you would assume that they have all the people they need to play their parts. So when would the situation come up where you would suggest hiring session musicians? Is it just for solo artists who just can't do it, or is it with bands as well?
It is for both. So sometimes I do work with solo artists and we have to build a band around them. And that is where I first developed this skill of choosing the right band, I think. And by the way, as a self-producing band, whoever that producer hat is the person that's meant to be deciding who's playing what and was right for that. And we've talked about, choosing who plays the guitar on the record. And sometimes that's just one of the guitar players. So choosing the band is part of the producer's job. And in that case, we're hiring like a full band, Often with a singer-songwriter, they don't even play the guitar. If they're an acoustic guitar singer-songwriter, we'll still hire a guitarist because what they're really like talented at is being the singer and the lyricist and stuff like that. Actually, I work with one musician, Michael Wilford, who writes the songs but doesn't even sing them. He ends up drumming on them, but he hires, he'll go and choose a vocalist for it as well, which is really rare and very cool, I think. But so yeah, there's that, building a band, but even when I'm working with a band, it still does come up. The usual situation is an instrument that nobody knows how to play. So say they want an organ, but they don't have a keyboardist. That's a very common one. We'll hire somebody to give us keys parts. Or a very common one, again, would be the fiddle. So if it's like a country song or something like that, and we wanted to really sound country and get some fiddle or lap steel, stuff like that, those are rarer instruments. Not many people play those, especially in the circle of a rock band or a guitar band. So we have to find somebody to do that. And sometimes hiring a session musician means bringing them into the studio and recording them, which is always a blast. I love doing that. I get to produce their take and engineer it and tell them exactly what I want in real time and get layers and stuff like that. That's the best. But it's much more expensive because we have to book additional studio time. We have to pay them to get to us. And there's one huge limitation, and that is that we need them to live near us for this to happen, right?
Yeah.
Now, with the internet, we can find somebody in Nashville that plays the fiddle, and you can guarantee they're going to kick ass, right?
Yes.
And you can look at the resume and they're like, oh, they played for all these big names. Like, they're obviously good. And you can verify that. Like, do they have credit on this album? They do. All right, this person's the real deal. You still have to get examples and figure out if their engineering skills are good. That's part of the puzzle. They don't have to just be a good musician. They also have to be able to record themselves well. We just talked about the noisy laptop. You don't want that in your recording. But yeah, so finding somebody online is totally possible, and then they just send it to you remotely, which is fantastic. And there's obviously pros and cons of both. Normally, it's cheaper to do the remote thing, but we don't get to produce their performances in real time and give feedback. There's just more of a you get what they give you kind of situation in that involved. So you really have to choose the right person and be very descriptive in what you're looking for as well.
Yeah, I'd say though that this is becoming more and more the norm, especially now with COVID and stuff. And I think that the whole remote thing is really, it can be a lucrative niche, to be honest. There's demand for that. And I think that the attended sessions, they're still a thing. But I think hiring someone remotely and like maybe producing them through the computer, or maybe not at all, is the way that most people are going to do it probably. Now, most people, I think, would then ask, like, how do I find someone like that? Do I go on like these freelancing platforms? Like, do I go on Fiverr or whatever and like type in session musician or drummer, or do I go to Sound Better, which is a platform for that? Or where do you have your contacts from?
So word of mouth is always a good idea. Like, referrals are based on trust usually and shared experience. So you know what a great idea would be? Go to the selfrecordingband.com/community and ask there. And I will probably chime in because I have like the best Rolodex of session musicians now.
Awesome.
And I love finding new ones, like new people. I'm like, a drummer comes in for a session with me and I've never recorded them before. And I'm like, wow, you are world class. You are now in my contact list. And I know how you play and what your style is and how you tune drums. You are now a sound that's banked away in my head. And if I need it again, you're going to get a call.
You know what? We should make a thread in our, just so I don't forget this, I'm going to write this down. We should make a thread in our community where we just basically allow for people to advertise their musician services or whatever. Because usually I don't allow self-promotion in that group, because like you have to, you know what happens if you allow that. So we don't do that typically. But we should do a thread and like facilitate connections and like just allow people to collaborate and show others what they can do, because I really want our community to collaborate like that. And it would be very cool to have a producer or a band who needs someone, like to have them find someone in our community who can play whatever they are lacking, or like that's a really good idea. Let's do that. Let's create a thread or like regular threads and allow people to post it.
For sure. Now, there's one more scenario where hiring a session player comes into play, and that is when you need to replace a band member that just can't do it up to snuff. This is usually a drummer. Just because drums are the hardest thing to get world-class recordings of, right? There's so much at play. They have to be just like a master of meter and of the metronome. They have to, be able to tune their drums, and they have to be able to hit their drums consistently. Like a recording drummer and a gigging drummer are just different animals often.
Yes.
So, and again, sometimes you could have the best drummer in the world at playing blast beats, but if you need them to do like some backbeat groove thing, they just can't. It's just like not their style or something. Sometimes you just have to hire a different drummer for that song. It happens. Always a tough conversation to have, but it just has to happen sometimes. If you want your recording to be kick-ass, you have to kind of solve these problems. And so that happens. Sometimes it's a guitarist, sometimes it's a bassist, sometimes it's a drummer. It's whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, agreed. So but back to finding people like that. So you mentioned the community, but other than the community, like where do you look for people? Like, let's say it's a drummer. Let's say you need a drummer, which is the most complicated thing to look for, and you need someone really skilled. You need someone who can play the drums well for a recording session, and that person also needs to be good at engineering and understanding you and have a good room and all of that. Like, where do you find a person like that?
Okay, so I would assume that I'm not the only person that keeps track of the good musicians I've worked with. So ask the other skilled producers in your area. Yeah. They're going to know who has made their job easy because they're the people they're going to want to work with, right? And so reach out to people that have recorded people. That would be a great way. If you know a band that has used a session player, sometimes those rumors kind of leak out or whatever. You could ask them who they used. Or if you know a band like in your community that has just kick-ass recordings, you can ask them, oh, did you play this? Do you do session work? Do do you want to come to my studio, or do you have a recording setup? You can start that conversation. Again, I think going to an engineer or a producer and finding out from them is a really good idea, because that you're not asking the musician personally. The musician's always going to want to do it. If you ask a guitarist, do you want to play my song? They will say yes.
Probably, yeah.
It doesn't matter if they have never played your genre, they'll probably say yes. So you getting it from somebody else, I think, is really wise, because it's going to be a little more unbiased. But then, the trick still stands of, do they have a self-recording setup? And really, you just have to ask them to send you demo recordings. Feel free to share those demo recordings with somebody that has experience with engineering. Like, if you don't know what to look for in drum recordings, you should probably try and get an opinion from somebody. Yeah. And again, the resume is huge. So there's this guy called Fiddlin' Dan who plays with like Dierks Bentley and stuff, big country names. And he does pretty much anytime I need fiddle or banjo, he's our first choice. And I was pretty able to just say, yeah, let's do this, because of his resume. Like the tier of people he works with, I knew it was going to be good. And he had an example up on his web. So I guess that's one more way to find it, is you just look online and find some session players have their own websites. In this case, I'm just remembering that the client found him somehow. I don't know how, but they sent me his website and were like, this guy seems perfect. And he was. And now I've used him, 20 times.
Yeah. That's very good. But all of these things are still sort of from your community or circle of people that or like some sort of word of mouth. So I think you would rarely turn to like the freelancing platforms or stuff like that and look there. I mean, because that could work, I think.
That definitely could work. And I have. So I think we've mentioned SoundBetter, which is probably the biggest musical services marketplace going right now. I have looked on there, and there's audio examples on there, which is cool. Honestly, I don't think we found... I used it and I sent some people to the client, but I don't think we ended up going with them on there. I'm sure that would work though. There's no reason it wouldn't. Fiddlin' Dan probably has a profile in there. I just haven't looked for it there. I've just got his email.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. You should look in your circle of like friends and bands, and people you worked with, or like just as you said, like if you know a producer, or if you know a record that you really like and you look up who played on that record, it's not too hard most of the time to just contact those people if you have the budget for it. And honestly, session musicians are often more affordable than you'd think. Like, I've mixed songs for people who hired crazy famous people for those songs, and it doesn't cost a fortune. Like, they are charging accordingly. But it's not as crazy as you might think for many of those. And so maybe just look at who played on those tracks, and then just find a way to contact them and ask.
Totally. Yeah. I've worked with Grammy-winning musicians for $100 a song. That is ridiculous. That is so stupid.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's really ridiculous. Yeah.
So stupid, but like they're so good. They're probably knocking it out in 20 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't expect that though.
No,
word of warning, don't expect that price, but it could happen. So yeah.
It could happen. And there's a reason I'm leaving out a name, because I don't, they can charge according to whatever they want. Now, so maybe we should talk about best practices for how to do this, specifically to remote. Because if it's an in-person thing, it's the same as any other recording day, really. But I will say that send them the track in advance so they have time to prepare. Yeah. That's really the tip there. But if you're doing a remote thing, I guess we've talked about collaborating remotely before.
So it's the same thing, on that. Yeah.
You have to consolidate tracks to the start of your session. I like to put in a little like count-in with a click. So like the first 4 beats have a click printed into it, and then they can visually see that it lines up with their session, that the BPM's right. Put the BPM in the file name so that they have that there, or you can send an info sheet or whatever, and make sure it's well balanced enough to play to. You need them to make musical decisions that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. So the mix has to be pretty decent. The better the mix, the better they're going to do. And then, so you send them that track. I usually send, just a rough bounce, like one file, with everything pretty well balanced. You could send them stems, but honestly, I think that's just going to confuse, take away from them focusing on playing their instrument. So I would probably just do a well-balanced reference track. If they ask for something in particular, you could do that. But I think it's important. Like I'm thinking about the fiddle right now in particular, but with like something like that, I definitely need to have the vocal in there. I definitely need to have the lead guitar in there. I need the whole song to exist pretty much. This is almost always the last thing we do because I want the decisions this other person is adding to be built to complement everything else that is meant to like written into the song, that was written with the artist. They have to, they're not just doing their own thing. They're not laying the foundation. They're adding to it. They're the finishing carpentry section.
Yeah. Now, okay, so what do you do when it comes to telling them what they should play? Like, do you include a scratch track? And like, if let's say you need a fiddle and no one in the room can play, would you then program sort of a scratch track for them? Would you play it with a keyboard? Would you say, do whatever you think fits the part or whatever? Like, what do you do there?
So this is where I think I kind of have a superpower in building good teams, is that when I put somebody in my Rolodex, it's not just because they played in time or end in tune. It's like I also categorize their style. Like I know I can pretty much picture what they're going to do to some extent. And that, like, honestly, that works almost every time. So I'll just keep using Fiddlin' Dan. I'm just giving you referrals, buddy. I think one time we sent him an arrangement for what we wanted on like a kind of symphonic string part. But otherwise, it's here's the song, go nuts. I know it's going to be perfect. And we've never asked for a revision. We've asked for a double. That's the only revision request I've made, is like, could you play the same part twice so I can pan it out? So awesome. Like, I know I know his style, and I know that if I hire him, that I'm going to get that style. And it's exactly what I'm looking for if I want that. I know other string players, and I will hire them if I'm looking for something different. Same with drummers. I know who's going to give me the Bonham sounding drums and who's going to give me like a tight metal sounding kind of kit that might be great for like a pop song or something as well, like very short decays. I know that stuff. I know who's got a big drum room, and who's got a tight sounding drum room. And I know who plays straight and who plays swingy. So I generally hire musicians and then don't tell them anything because the song's already telling them what to do.
All right. Okay. That's cool. So that requires you to hire people who are not only great at playing and like engineering, but as you said, they also need to be sort of, they have to have more of a musical knowledge. They almost have to be writers in a way, or at least creative enough to add their own thing to it.
Totally.
That's challenging for some people, though, I think. So,
totally. And it requires a lot of trust on the part of like myself or the band that is hiring the session player. They have to trust that they're choosing the right person, because it's honestly, it's just not realistic to overproduce remotely. You're not there with them. Some people will do like a zoom in kind of thing. So you could do that and kind of sit in with them while they make and direct it like you were producing it in person. But generally, if you want that, do it in person is my opinion. If you want it to just kind of be that you're trusting that they're going to give you what you want, choose the right person and trust that they're going to give you what you want. Yeah. And, a lot of people will have revisions built in, especially drummers, because drums there's so many options. And they're so foundational. So in that case, it's like, oh yeah, loved this, but could we go to the crash on the course instead? And then they just whip out the take again kind of thing. That's totally fine. But on revisions, I will say you want to declare what that arrangement is before you start working with each other. How many revisions are included? What does the process look like when you're working with this person?
100%. Communication is everything here. So I would definitely talk about like revisions. Also, in general, I would communicate as much as possible before the session, like when it comes to like boundaries, like deadlines, revisions, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the creative part, I totally agree that it's cool to have someone who can just do it and be creative. But I think the trick is to be open enough for new ideas and just let the person do their thing, but also being clear enough and giving them enough direction so that they end up giving you what you want. So that there's the balance there, because I think you have to give them some guidance and direction, and I think they will appreciate that. Even if they are really great musicians and they could just do whatever they're good at, they will probably appreciate if you just take the lead and like give them directions and tell them what you want to get out of the track or what you want the song to feel like, or can be something like that. But some sort of guidance, I think, is important.
Yeah. Now, again, the reference track being as complete as possible does a lot of that for you, especially with a lead instrument, like using the fiddle again. Like there's a complete song by that point. So where they have spots to play is painfully obvious if they're great. But yeah, nobody's going to regret being given a reference track. Like, hey, here's a country song that has fiddle the way I was hoping. Okay, that kind of style, no problem. That's going to be helpful for sure. So yeah, it's hard to over communicate, I think. But I do want to stress that when working remote, it's not the same as being in person. So don't expect to have to change every lick you get back. It's just too tedious, and they're not charging enough to be able to do that remotely. In person is better for that stuff.
Yeah, totally. Like the only instrument where I really have experience with this is in fact drums. So like you said in the beginning, and when I would hire session drummers, I would program the drums though, just because we need something to track to anyways, and we need that. It's so foundational that I can't really do anything without having a scratch drum track at least. So in this case, if you're hiring a drummer, I think you can absolutely send them your scratch drums or your programmed drums, and then it's just a matter of telling them whether they should stick exactly to what you programmed, or if you want them to add something to it or change it up or whatever, because both could be the case. I've worked with bands who really wanted very specific fills in certain parts, and we needed to tell the drummer to play exactly that. And then we had like cases where it was just some fill just so we had one, and we told the drummer to just do whatever you think works well in this part.
Yeah, so this is all placeholder, but it gives a vibe. Yeah, that's totally a great idea. And I think that would kind of be dictated by genre as well. Like, the more intentional and like I'm thinking like a hard rock, new metal, or heavy metal song where everything's very coordinated. You know, you're going to need to give them some coordination and then be like, hey, you can tell what's going on here now. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I think I would have, just when you said that, we need specific fills, I'm like, okay, there's like 2 drummers that come to mind that could handle that. It's important that I know which players could do that even, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm working with a client that is that kind of particular, I just rule out like half my list of players because they're not going to be able to keep up with that style, right? That's just not how some people work. Yeah. So again, that's another good thing to know in your Rolodex is like, are they a technical beast? Okay, then they're going to be good for this technical project. Yeah.
Which brings me back to the best practices thing that we started with. So part of it is like everything we just said, proper communication, determining the revision process before, like in advance, all these things. But it's also important, especially with drums, but it could happen with other instruments as well, I guess, is that make sure that what you're programming or what you're giving them as a scratch track is actually doable. So if you are that band who is really like, if you are that particular about certain fills and stuff, make sure that a human can actually play this. And I'm saying it because I've witnessed it a lot when when guitarists write songs and they just program drums to it and then they want to hire someone to play that. Oftentimes there are parts that would require 4 arms. And so you would just make sure that a drummer can actually play that. And if you can't do that, just show it to a drummer and ask if this is doable.
Right. Yeah. Very, very good idea. They only have 2.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
Other best practices though, what else is really important? Because this is all about communication basically, and about the scratch tracks and about the vision and all of that. But like technical things. You already said, I think, that you should make a mix that sounds good and probably give them that instead of individual tracks. I would agree. The click count in, a very good idea. But
if you're providing a reference, like you said, you program drums or you had a reference melody you wanted followed in certain parts or something, keep that on a separate track, I would say, so they can remove it if they want to, or boost it up kind of thing to follow it closer, or just that's a good practice. Probably wouldn't regret that.
I'd say make
money.
sure. Okay, yeah, money. I was about to add to the technical stuff. Make sure you got the sample rate right and communicate that as well. Like if you've recorded in 48, then tell them to record in 48 and give them the mix in 48. So when they import it, like nothing is in the wrong tempo or pitch or whatever. Just that's very important and can be overlooked easily. I've had people collaborate with each other in completely different sample rates and different DAWs and everything, and it just gets so messy, and everybody has to convert back and forth and like avoid that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, you know what? Here's one differentiator. The best session players I work with send me one thing back. They say, here it is, and it is comped and in time and awesome. They don't send me, hey, I did 5 takes.
Yes.
Use what you want. That is the rookie move. The rookie move is, I did 5 takes. I'm sure you could piece something together. I didn't know what you want, so I did a bunch of different stuff.
That gives me anxiety just hearing that. Like.
You're fired immediately in my books. Yeah, like it's just like, and what that says is, I didn't make any decisions. I didn't decide on a direction. So here's a bunch of garbage.
Yes.
So if you're thinking about being a session musician, that's important to know. You're meant to deliver your part. And give them one. You can have a second one ready if you want. And be like, oh yeah, you need some also. It's here, I already have it all ready for you. But send the one. Be like, this is what I wanted to do.
Preach. It's just absolutely the same for people hiring mixers, by the way. I get that all the time. Like, here is I don't know, we've recorded 5, as you said, we've recorded 5 vocal takes. Just pick the one you like most. No. No, I won't. So
exactly.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, totally. Commit.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's that. I wanted to touch on the money side of things because, like you said, this is all communication. Figure out what they want to be paid in advance. Figure out if they charge GST, so you're not caught off guard at that. Figure out what currency they charge in as well. You don't want to have any surprises on your side or their side, and just keep that out of, like, you just don't want anybody thinking about that stuff. I don't know. I think, like, I usually am happy to pay in advance for their services because I trust these people enough and I know they're professionals, and then that's just out of the way, and the conversation's like, it's just not on their mind. I like that, but it doesn't have to be that. Everybody's going to have their own way of, sometimes they might want to deposit, whatever, but just make sure that all happens before music happens.
Yes.
Now, there's a thing called a work for hire, which is a legal form you're meant to get them to sign that says they were paid to do this work and they don't own any rights to this recording, including their rights as a performer. Like, there's performance royalties, I think, that they're forfeiting in that as well, I think. I am not a lawyer. I should know this because I've totally talked about this on my other podcast. Yeah. I don't remember. But you're meant to get them to do that. I've played on so many goddamn records and never signed one in my life. But I'm not going to go after these people. Like, that's a good way to burn my career to the ground, I think, if I was making a stink. But I would happily sign one. If you're listening to this and I've worked with you and you want me to sign one, send it to me. I will still sign it. And you should do that. You should get them to sign it. Because if your song goes and becomes a number 1, you don't want to be getting sued for it and saying that they have some claim to it or something. So that's a good practice. Get a work for hire form. And now in my mind, there's a difference between hiring somebody to be the drummer on the song and then a difference between, here is my new song featuring so-and-so from this band. Yes. Like a feature is interesting because it is implying, I don't know, it's almost like you're using their brand to market your song if you're putting it into the title of the song. So that's worth considering. And I think, again, should be communicated if you are allowed to do that in advance, if they're comfortable with it. Do they want to be associated with it? Maybe they want to do the part and not get credit at all. They want to be a ghost musician. Maybe that suits their brand needs better. If they're in a totally different genre, that's very realistic to think.
Yes.
So all of that should be figured out in advance as well.
I agreed. It gets tricky because I don't think that it's only for features that this really starts to matter. It could also be for any sort of like lead instrument where somebody basically writes a melody or something for a song, because I mean they could sign a form like that and like you'd be fine. But still, I think, let's say the song is like becomes a number 1 and somebody you hired played, like they came up with a lead melody on some instrument and it's like the thing that people know, like it's
the hook.
It's the hook, yeah. Then they've absolutely contributed to that song and they are like co-writing that song basically in a way. So you need to have that conversation, whatever route you're going, but you have to you have to have that conversation in advance and make sure that everybody is on the same page there, and that you have that you have documented it in some way, because that could go very, very badly in the end. Like you could, I don't want to even think about that situation. So you should just have some sort of contract or some sort of form signed, or you should just give them points. Like if they really contribute to the song and they write a melody, and the song is released and it's a hit song, they get compensated accordingly. So that is a very common thing too. So whatever they prefer, whatever you prefer, let's just have a conversation about it. We are not lawyers. We can't give you advice here. We're just saying, talk about this stuff and don't ignore it, because you will regret it later if you don't.
Yeah, so there's no reason somebody couldn't also get paid and have points, like, hey, I want to be compensated and have a writer's credit. Like that's a totally reasonable negotiation as well. But it just needs to be negotiated in advance and written down somewhere and stored. Actually, this is so important, because if you sync a song and it goes to be put into a TV show or something, they will expect to receive like a signed document that all of these people are on board with this, and they need to know who those people are so that those people can get paid for their royalties of it being on this TV show. And if you don't have that documents, like that stuff ready, they'll just move on, because they make those decisions like really quick. They have like 24 hours to turn this around and get it approved.
Good point.
So if you're not ready, you lose. It's on. They're choosing a different song. So you have to have that all squared away. Also, your producer might be hiring this musician, but your producer is not your legal entity. So you have to do this shit. Your producer is busy making your song. So you email the musician and get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are self-producing, then it's your job, unfortunately.
Double duty, buddy.
Yes, exactly that. But that's a good point. I didn't even think about it, but that's a very good point. You got to be prepared if you don't want to lose these opportunities, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the pain in the ass work, but it's what separates, the winners from the losers.
Totally. Yep. And also the other way around, if you play on other people's records, maybe you should think about starting to negotiate that stuff. Maybe you should think about getting points, or charging more in case you're not getting credited as a writer. Or maybe you could make it easier for your clients and prepare some form and send it to them. Like there are many ways from both sides many things you could do to make this easier. And just think about that, and whatever you do, just avoid the conversation after it's too late, because then it really gets messy, and it's like very hard to do that after the fact.
Totally. I heard a great quote yesterday, and it was, if the roof's leaking, it's too late to fix it, and the roof isn't leaking when it's sunny.
Yeah. That is true. That is very, very true. Yep. Yeah, totally. All right. So what should you expect from session musicians, and what should you deliver if you want to be a session musician? So what is expected? As you said, one consolidated performance. That's the right format, the right sample rate, all of that, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I expect that first and foremost. I expect really good communication. I want them to tell me how much they cost, of course, like volunteer that stuff. Like if they're being coy about that, it's a red flag, and I'm moving on. And I expect a timeline, and I do expect them to stick to that timeline. That's, again, if they're consistently late, I'm going to remove them from the Rolodex, because I can't have that. It reflects bad on me, and I can't plan to complete songs in time. And obviously, that's just like, it's already a stressful experience for the artist, because they put so much trust in this thing, and then they often pay them, and then they're just waiting in limbo. So communication, being there, and I try and just have a conversation with the session player, the artist, and me CC'd together, so everybody's getting updated at all times. So yeah, really good file that sounds awesome and is the right taste, and good communication. That's really all you need back to be a happy person at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. What about like doubles, or like let's say, with vocals you'd really have for session musicians, but in fact,
we do backing vocals.
Yeah, I was about to say, especially in the country world, there are some people making a living just of singing backing vocals.
Definitely,
and they're crushing it. So in that case, or like if it's a guitarist, for example, that's part of the communication thing, I guess. But would you expect them to deliver, I don't know, doubles, harmonies, whatever, or is that totally up to the person hiring and giving direction?
that is actually something I tend to be specific about. I try to specify that I expect doubles of everything. Because why not, right? Why not have that? So, I mean, like if you're a hard rock session guitarist, chances are you would anyways. That's what I would do. If somebody hired me to play guitar, you're going to get a left and a right for sure. I still ask for it just to make sure it happens. Vocalists in particular, because for whatever reason, that's just not how vocalists think. They're like, I'm one person, here I am, here's my harmony, here's another harmony kind of thing. And that's cool, but it'd be way more fun for me if I had a double of everything just to work with. So I try to be specific about that. But, on a fiddle, I often don't. I just get the one back, and that's great. That sounds like what I wanted. I might say, oh, you made this hook here that is now going to be the core of the song. Can you just double that for me? And then I can have that part have doubles. And, that's the revision request. I know that he's going to be happy to knock off that extra little track for me, no problem.
Okay, cool. Now, what about editing? Do you expect edited, mix-ready tracks that you just pull into your session and you don't have to do anything to them? Or do you expect raw performances and you edit it and make sure the timing and intonation, everything is just spot on?
Okay, so I don't necessarily expect it to be edited, but I expect it to be so tight that it doesn't necessarily need it.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. If they're a session musician, that means they're good enough that it should be totally usable, whatever they send me.
Yeah. This doesn't mean that it doesn't need a few additional tweaks, because as we said, even the best musicians in the world need some help sometimes. And like editing is totally about being intentional with every single note, no matter how good the performance is. So it could be that you still have to edit it, but it should be very much in the ballpark. It should be very close to perfect. Yeah.
It's a choice. If they're at session level, it's a choice. And I know, there's one drummer that I've worked with remotely that does edit his tracks and send them to me, and I love it. It's like, great, that's awesome. Perfect. And then there's another one that doesn't, but it's very, very tight, and I make the decision if I even need to based on that. When I do session work, I totally edit my guitar parts before I send them out.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I'm sure there's other people that don't.
Yeah, awesome, cool. All right, now there's one final thing, and I think you should always do that, regardless of, you should do that in general, whether you're working with mixers, mastering engineers, or session musicians, or anybody. Give credit. That is so important, and so many people forget that in our industry for some reason. There have been whole podcast episodes from other podcasts talking about this because it's such a weird thing. Yeah, just give credit. Just name the people that contributed to your record if they want to. Sometimes they don't want to be credited, and that's fine. But just do it. No photographer would ever allow you to publish any of their photos or post them online or whatever without giving credit. They would immediately come at you and ask you to add the credit. That is totally normal in the photo and video world. But for some reason, it's not as common in the audio world. And so many people post their videos on YouTube, and you can read who did the video and you can see who did whatever, but you rarely see the producers, or let alone session musicians or editors or mastering engineers or whatever. There's so many people involved in making this, but for some reason, only the videographers get the credit so often. So yeah, it's the truth. And I think, and even platforms like Spotify, it took them years or decades now to get that right, and they still don't. It's there's still no proper way to include credits when you release something. So yeah, just do it without being asked for it. Just turn that into a habit. Just ask people for how they want to be credited. Put it everywhere you post and release your music, and it just helps those people work for more people and create more awesome music. If you are happy with what they did for you, just support them and give proper credit.
Totally. And here's a really good pitch to why you should do this. Say you hired one session musician and a mixer and maybe a mastering engineer. Let's go with, or we'll scratch match an engineer. We'll say a session musician, a mixer who also mastered it for you, and then a video for the music video. So 3 people. If you tag all 3 of them in your post, there's 3 more people that are probably going to share your post. And because they can share it, when you tag it, it allows you to now actually share it as your own thing on your Instagram stories or whatever. So you're doing yourself a favor as well. There's no reason not to.
Yes, absolutely. So
that's my main pet peeve about somebody being oh, new song today, and they don't they put me in the comments or tag me or whatever. It's like, I can't even share it, guys. Like, it's less about my credit. I can't even help you.
Yeah. Yes, totally. So yeah, do that. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just something you should always do regardless. And for session musicians, totally. I mean, yeah, nothing more to add to this.
Yes, and now I quickly want to touch on the ghost subject again.
Oh yeah.
They might not want to for whatever reason. So in that case, you don't have to. Again, I think putting their name in like the title as like a feature is something that really has to be communicated in advance because their name and their band are brands. So make sure that is a transparent conversation. Like if you, I don't know, hired somebody that played on a U2 song and then you said, so-and-so of U2 would be totally allowed to sue you. You're not allowed to use their brand. Their brand is worth millions and millions of dollars. You're an asshole. And that's a stupid thing to do anyways. So careful with that. But then if you don't want to give credit, maybe you don't want people to know that you didn't play the guitar on your album. That is called ghost work, essentially. And you should be paying that person more to hide, like pretty much to ask them to conceal the fact that they did it for you. This happens in the writing world a lot. People ghostwrite for people. So you think you're reading a book by somebody, but it was written by somebody else. And it's just how it is. So many blogs are like that. Here's a useful tip on how to record guitars written by not who you think it is.
It happens. Totally happens. In music, the same way. So many hit songs have been written by the same couple of people. You just don't know. I mean, you can look that up, of course, but it's not always obvious and not always communicated. No. So
sometimes it is actually totally concealed and hidden.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just not advertised, but sometimes it's it'll actually say somebody else did it and who actually did it. So just be aware, if you don't want to give credit, tell them you're not going to give them credit and pay them for that, and have them sign something, of course, that says the same thing for you. I do want to say that Benny does write his own blog posts on the self-recording band.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I do.
And we haven't figured out how to do the podcast with ghost, people. We can't. As soon as I can have somebody that sounds like me come in here, I'm going to stop doing it. But
exactly. That being said, if you are a great writer and know what you're talking about, just hit me up. Like, I'm totally open to publishing guest posts or whatever. Like, I would love to do that. And I would absolutely credit you for that. But at the moment, I'm doing all of it. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, and maybe the final thing, don't be offended. Don't be offended if someone doesn't want to be credited because it could just be that they want to help you and they can improve your song, but the song just might not be on their level, or they might not want to be associated with that, because you got to realize it depends on who it is and who you are and how good the song is. But these people are selective with what they want their name attached to. And if they are telling you, I'm happy to help you and it's this much, but I don't want to be credited, then don't be offended. That is actually pretty common. That it can even happen with mixing or mastering. Could even be that someone is willing to mix your song or master your song, but they don't want to be credited because it's not good enough to be a part of their portfolio. That is just normal. And I think you should be prepared for that to happen at some point and not be offended if it happens.
Totally. Yeah. All right. Well, to end this off, I would love to play guitar on more records. Hit me up. And also, I know just awesome session musicians, so please hit me up on that. Actually, you know what? We did an episode with Wet Future a few back. Their drummer, Brett Attic, has started as their session player. He was just sending in tracks remotely from his own studio, and now he's in the band. But he does that, There you go.
Hit him up. And
he's part of the community as well.
Cool. Yeah, try it for yourself, and let us know how that goes. Like, if you are now starting to look for session musicians and hire your first musician for a song you're working on, let us know how it went and if it improved your songs, because I think it's a thing that people don't use often enough.
Totally.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you for listening. See you next week then.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.